MicroBrewr Podcast, Session 23.
Welcome to MicroBrewr Podcast, inspiring you as you start your own microbrewery or take your existing brewery to the next level. Here's your host, Nathan Pierce.
Welcome to MicroBrewr Podcast. We talk about everything craft beer related with a focus for people looking at starting their own microbreweries or wanting to take their existing breweries to the next level. I'm your host, Nathan Pierce. This is a weekly podcast interviewing brewers and brewery owners going deep to get inside the industry and inside the heads of people who work there. The website has show notes with links and resources mentioned in each episode, so check that out at microbrewer.com. That's microbrewer.com. And you know, one of my favorite parts of each episode is the listener questions. Before I started this podcast taking over for Joe Schellerud in episode 13, I sent some emails out and text messages to friends and family and stuff, and they sent me some questions. I just asked, tell me one question that you would like to ask every brewery owner. And some other questions have come in on Twitter and Facebook, but the list is running kind of low. I want to keep that section up of the podcast. So please go to the show notes for this episode, microbrewer.com/session23, and tell me, what would you ask the next guest on the show? Thanks a lot for doing that. If you like the show, please subscribe in iTunes or Stitcher so you won't miss any episodes. They'll send them to you right when they come out. And while you're in iTunes, please leave a review. Mac2417 left a review on July 28th. He said he's working his way through from episode 1 and am really impressed. So I don't know how far he is. Hopefully he's impressed beyond episode 12, because Joe Schellerud, founder of this podcast and microbrewer.com, was hosting up through episode 12 before I took over. So that's why feedback as a review in iTunes really helps. Lets me know how I'm doing. Lets me know how to improve. And it also helps with searches too. Makes it easier for people to find the podcast on iTunes. So if you want a link to find the podcast in iTunes, you can go to microbrewer.com/iTunes. In this episode, I talk with Paddy Elliott from Pecan Street Brewing in Johnson City, Texas. Paddy is the founder and owner with her husband, and their son, Sean, is the brewer. They already had an export business, but they saw this old empty hardware building, and they just thought that something should go there. So they thought about it, and they thought brewpub would be the best thing. So we talked a little bit. We had a pretty cool discussion about the past lives of old buildings that now house breweries. And Paddy also tells us some stories behind some fun names for their beers, besides all the other great information that we usually get. So here's the interview. Hi, Paddy. I introduced you to the listeners. Now let's take a few minutes and tell us more about you and your brewery.
All right.
How did you get into the business?
We had moved to the small town, Johnson City, Texas, and there was a building that used to be the old hardware and rancher's supply store, and it was a very interesting building to my husband, and it sat empty for a couple of years, and he just felt like something good needed to go in the building. And so Sean, our son, who was helping us with our export business, and we all talked about it and came up with the idea of doing something related to craft beer. We were trying to decide whether we would be a production brewery or a brew pub, and we decided on the brew pub. And so my husband spent 3 years renovating the building while we still had our export business. And we got a small brewing system, and Sean spent 3 years brewing. And at the end of that time is when we opened. So was just our idea, was just trying to have a brew pub in this building.
So you had another business. How did you decide that craft beer would be the next thing?
At the time that we bought the building, we envisioned selling the other business so that we would be able to devote all of our attention to this business. When it came down to it, that didn't work out, and so we just continued to work at opening the brew pub while we maintained our export business.
Yeah, I saw the picture on the website of the building. That was one of the things that most interested me about you guys. It looks like a pretty neat little place you have.
It is. It actually reminds my husband and myself and other people that we know from our past of the place that we met, which was the Armadillo Music Hall in Austin, Texas. I was going to school at UT, and he was working there. And it's the same type of structure, an old armory, double armory buildings. And so that probably is what appealed to Tim. Anyways, this building was the place in town where the gentlemen would gather in the mornings and have coffee and just talk and gather. And kids also would come in, and it has a very great feel to it. When we first opened, we had so many old-timers tell us that the building felt really good. They really liked the way it felt still. And so we felt really good about that we were able to keep that karma of the building, I guess.
I interviewed recently Phillipsburg Brewing Company in Phillipsburg, Montana, and they also have another building. There's so many microbreweries opening so rapidly these days that a lot of them are just opening up in previously used buildings. And the picture for Phillipsburg Brewing Company, it looks like an ancient drugstore. I forget exactly how old they told me it was, but it's like from the turn of the century or something. We were talking about that in episode 20. I just think it's so neat to think about the history of beer in this country and in the context of the old buildings that some of the new breweries are in. It's neat stories behind them. I
bet. And we certainly like to see an old building or anything old be repurposed, reused to save our resources and to make as small a footprint as possible. And so anytime there's a building that's empty, we would prefer to see that reutilized than new construction.
So I was looking on your website. You have about 20 different beers listed on there. And 2 of them actually caught my eye. The first one I want to talk about, it's kind of fun because it's called Chupacabra Red Ale. Is that one of the regulars that you make?
I think Sean's made that a couple of times. There is another red ale that we have more frequently, and that's the Road Devil Red, which we have on tap right now. But some of the names of our beers are a nod to the history of the building, like the Screw Loose Blonde and the Tenpenny Nail Ale. Others are in honor of local events or people. We had a beer called Ladybird's Wit. Then some of them, we are right across the street from the county courthouse and right next to what was the oldest operating jail in Texas. It has now been replaced by a new jail about a mile away. But so a lot of the beer names are relative to that, like the 1897 Jailbreak IPA, the Hang 'em High, County Jail Pale Ale, which is one that we always try to have on tap also. So, and then the brown ales, he's trying to name after brown animals in the area. javelina, jackalope. Trying to think of another beer we have was called Hell or High Water, and that was because Johnson City experienced a torrential downpour one evening. It rained about 7 inches in a half an hour, and the way the building is. Did you say whoa?
Yeah, 7 inches in a half an hour.
Oh, yes, it was a lot. And the water cannot run off fast enough in between the two our building and the one next door. And so it started backing up and came in through our back door and ran all the way through the restaurant and the brewing area into out the front doors, because there's like a half-inch difference.
Oh my gosh.
And so we had to close the restaurant down, of course, and all the employees just spent the evening sweeping the water from the back door to the front door and out. And the next day, Sean was brewing that beer, so he named it Hell or High Water.
Wow. So did I hear you say you have a beer named after the brown animal, jackalope?
Uh-huh.
And so,
which is not a true animal.
Oh, darn it. I was going to ask you if you had a picture of it, that rare animal. The Chupacabra is especially funny to me because I grew up in kind of a rural area, and not quite as rural as Johnson City. I saw that you guys have about 1,700 people, but Hollister, California has about 30,000 when I was growing up there, and there's lots of rural areas around, and sometimes we would go on night hikes, and that was around the time when there was the Chupacabra on TV.
Oh, really?
The goat sucker, it is in Spanish, and it's like a super fast animal that comes out at night and sucks the blood dry from your cattle and whatnot. So that's why you named it after your red ale, I guess.
Yes.
Now, your holiday ale is made with Texas pecans.
Correct.
Is it pecan or pecan?
We call it pecan. We notice a lot of people call it pecan.
All right.
But we are actually on Pecan Drive. When we bought the building, the plat said Pecan Street, and so when we came up with the name for the brew pub, we called it Pecan Street Brewing, and later found out that actually the road is called Pecan Drive. But we like Pecan Street better anyways. And so we do try to have pecans in different things, the beer, or we have a Pecan Street, pecan sweet chicken. Our Mexican chocolate cake has pecans in it. So we try to highlight pecans just because it's a great Texas product.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask you if it was purely just for the name of the street. So it sounds like it's kind of popular in that region. Rich Weber from Sierra Blanca Brewing Company said that he contract brews a pecan beer, and it's actually super popular. They're in New Mexico.
Oh, okay.
Well, thanks for broadening the picture. Now, let's get focused a little bit. But first, can you frame the discussion for us? Does Pecan Street have core values or core words or operating principles that you work by?
I would say our vision was to have a third place. And there is the workplace, there is home, and then there's a third place where the community gets together. And America is losing those type of places. There are strip centers now, there's malls, there's suburbs, but to have that local place where the community would gather, we're losing that. And so that's what we wanted our building and our venture to be, a third place for the community. So we try to welcome and make everybody feel comfortable, whether it's motorcycle riders or families or little ladies, little older ladies, whatever, craft beer drinkers. We want to make everybody feel like this is a place that they feel welcome and that they're comfortable in.
Yeah, a lot of people don't get out and about so much anymore. They don't go out to the parks or out to the local restaurant or the local pub and just hang out. And that's something that I really like about craft beer, is that it really community, a sense of community is a really big part of the whole feel surrounding craft beer entirely.
I agree.
So let's go deep, Paddy. Tell me the biggest mistake you ever made as a brewery owner.
That is probably the easiest question. We did not anticipate the need for more cold storage or a bigger brewing system. Even though we have a big building, we don't have a large area for Sean to store kegs in, and we only have 4 serving tanks. And so a serving tank has to get low enough that he could keg off the beer, that it will fit in the keg storage area so that he could brew another beer. So we are constantly fighting the battle of having enough beer on hand and having the variety of beers that we want. So we're desperately wanting to get more cold storage space so that he could keg more often and store it in kegs, and then he could brew again and use the serving tanks. So that's definitely the biggest mistake, was not putting in enough cold storage area.
So is that the thing that you'd change if you're going to start over again, or is there something else that you would do differently if you were to start your brewery over again to do it better?
Definitely we would do that.
More storage space and more cold storage.
Right. Have a bigger brewing area. We got a lot more restaurant space and not as big a brewing area. So maybe flip it.
Okay, so what's the best idea that you've ever had for your business?
I think the concept that we originally started with, that we wanted to be a third place.
That's working out pretty well. People feel pretty comfortable and pretty open, and you see lots of conversations starting up, and people are pretty outgoing when they're there?
Yes, I think so.
Awesome. So has there been a moment, maybe you looked around one day and you saw how comfortable everybody was there? Was there a moment when you realized that you finally succeeded?
That one, I think we're always keep wanting to improve. So I think we've succeeded. I mean, we have financially, but we want to be perfect. And we know we won't be there, but we just want to keep striving to be better. So I don't know if we could say we've ever succeeded, because we just keep wanting to get better. But a particular moment, I don't think there was a particular moment when we.
You're still looking forward to success.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea how you're going to define that right now, looking forward to it?
No. I mean, having a restaurant and a brew pub is a very demanding business. And we're just going to keep trying to make it as smooth as possible and work as well for the community and for our patrons, and be run as smooth as possible.
Well, in trying to create that third place, it looks like you guys have a lot of events happening out there. There's music going on like more than once a week, it looks like. What's been the favorite event that you put on, or the favorite memory that you have since opening the brewery?
We thought our actual opening night was our favorite memory, because we actually did it. I mean, we spent 3 years with Tim working on the building and, developing the menu, 3 years of Sean brewing, and finally it was just, okay, we just got to open. We're ready as we're ever going to be. Let's just open. And so actually having that day where we opened the doors and we served people and we closed the doors and people went away happy, that was fantastic to actually accomplish that.
Awesome. Sounds really neat. I could tell by the tone of your voice that you look back upon it fondly.
Yes, it was exciting.
So
we didn't have any experience in this except for myself being a waitress and Tim putting in the beer lines and stuff at the Armadillo, and that was in the early 70s. So there was a lot of new stuff for us to learn in opening a restaurant and a brew pub.
Sounds like it's all coming together. So what could you tell an aspiring homebrewer out there who wants to try and do something that you guys have done? What's the most important thing for someone starting a brewery? That they want to start a brewery, but that they can take action on tomorrow?
Okay. I would say, one, to be sure you have enough funds to cover it. Starting any business takes a lot more money than you think it will. So be sure you have enough funds to handle it. So, and also, besides having enough funds to see you through the beginning, you have to be willing to work long hours and have a strong commitment to finish and see it through. You have to really want it. And I would say that's true, again, for anybody starting their own business. It is hard. It does take a lot of work, long hours, and you have to be willing to stick with it.
Make sure you have enough funds and be ready to stick it out for the long haul.
Right.
Okay, now we have a question from one of our listeners, Christopher Kirby, who asks, what's the best beer you have ever had?
Well, one of my favorites that Sean brewed was called Tilting at Windmills, and it was a Belgian golden ale. He said it was about 8.5%, and it was really tasty. And I found since we've opened the brew pub, my tastes have evolved. I, like a lot of our other patrons, like our beer is hoppier than originally when we first opened. So I'm developing that taste for full bodies and lots of flavor.
Okay, now it's time for happy hour, Paddy. The next set of questions are a little lighter. We're going to get to know each other a little better and have some fun and get inside the industry. Are you ready?
I hope.
Cans or bottles?
Myself, a bottle.
What's the most challenging beer that Pecan Street has ever made?
That would be the Johnson City Lager. Our equipment is not set up to brew lagers, and so they do require cold chilling that really our equipment's just not designed for that. So Sean was a little concerned about that, but it turned out excellent. We had a lot of favorable comments on that one.
So you're not a brewer, but if you were going to make a 5-gallon batch at home this weekend, maybe you're going to make a home brew with your son, what beer would you want to make?
Either the Tilting at Windmills that I just mentioned, or he made one. It was a chocolate pecan milk stout, and we had it maybe a month ago, and it was fabulous.
Oh my gosh, it sounds great. Tell me one beer style that you think will be gaining more attention.
We're seeing, again, the hoppier beers. Like I said, we're in a small town, and at first we were very concerned about what our local traffic would enjoy, and because they're used to drinking domestic beers, but we have found that since we have been open, they are developing a taste, like myself, for the hoppier beers.
Like IPAs?
Correct.
Can you suggest a book for our audience that will help them succeed in opening a brewery?
Well, there's a book. Sean, our son that's the brewer, is a voracious reader, and he lots of times gives us books to read. And one of them was called The Great Good Place. And this book is about being a third place, which I had mentioned before. And so that is a book, I think, that kind of inspired us, that made us want to see this through. So it's The Great Good Place by Ray Oldenburg.
Give us one last piece of advice for someone who just brewed the first batch at their new brewery, and then we'll close up the brew house for the night.
Keep on keeping on.
Stay in it for the long haul.
Yes.
Great. Well, it's been good talking with you, Paddy. I appreciate you taking the time. Thanks for sharing your tips on starting and operating a successful brewery. So now tell us how we can stay in touch with you, and then we'll set this episode aside to ferment.
Well, we have our email address that goes to a few of us here at Pecan Street, and that is beerme, BEERME, at Pecan Street, spelled out, Brewing, with an ing.com.
Thanks again, Paddy Elliott, for being on MicroBrewr Podcast. Before the interview, you were telling me about all the many things going on for your brewery and the export business, so I really appreciate you being so generous with your time. I really appreciated Paddy's how she struggled to answer whether she has already succeeded. She says, we want to be perfect and we know we won't be there, but we want to keep striving to be better. I've been blogging about that lately, actually, at the last few blog posts that I wrote at nathanpierce.me were about my struggle with perfectionism and procrastinating and all that. And it's just nice to know that some people out there are striving for perfect, even though it's not attainable. It's something I'm working on and something I'm trying to get behind me so that I can just start to finish things. And the world never was changed by something that was unfinished, right? And what Paddy said about creating a third place. Currently, as I'm editing this, I'm staying up in Seattle, and some friends told us about the Third Place Bookshop, where they're also trying to create a third place, a community centered around books. So the book that Paddy mentioned is all about creating a place like that. So the book links that you see in the show notes, and some of the other links too, but mainly the book links, especially if they're pointing to Amazon, those are affiliate links. If you click on those, I'll get a little bit of a kickback. It's not much. It's like $1. I think it's like 4% or something. It doesn't add anything onto the price of what you get, but currently it's the only way that I'm monetizing this podcast. And I'm going to set up a book page pretty soon so that you can see all of the different books that have been recommended, and they'll have a ranking based on how many times each book has been recommended. So check that out. Keep an eye out for that on the website. And also, please go to microbrewer.com/session23. You'll find links to Pecan Street Brewing, where you can check out their stuff, and let Paddy Elliott know that you appreciate her being on the show. Thank you, everyone, for listening. This podcast is personally very enriching to me. I'm learning so much, and I'm not doing it only for myself. I'm doing it for you, too. So please leave a review in iTunes and let me know how I'm doing. I'll try and read your review on the podcast. So you can find iTunes easily with a link at microbrewer.com/iTunes. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, support your local brewery, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to MicroBrewr Podcast with Nathan Pierce. We'll see you right here next time at microbrewer.com.
If you want more resources for starting a craft brewery, check out microbrewer.com, microbrewer.com. If you want to become a Cicerone certified beer server, check out beerexamschool.com for free study guide and flashcards for the certified beer server exam. beerexamschool.com.